So as you all know, 2014 was a challenging budget year. Part of the challenge was due to some, I'll use the term, unfinished business from 2013. 2013 relied on some data and information. Without it, there were 3 fire trucks were put on a hold position. They were only funded for 6 months. So we found interim funding for the rest of the year. And we looked at the future of those apparatus based on information from a fire underwriters review and a POMAX review, a review of fire EMS. So again, a difficult year. We moved in 14. Again, some challenging financial targets. We looked at building the best option we could in 2014 budget, understanding the fiscal challenges and restraints we were under. We did have the opportunity, with the outcome of the fire underwriters review, to recommend to council an option and a way forward of moving from a level 4 classification for commercial and multi-res properties to a 3 in 2014. And in the future, by the year 2017, the goal is to get to a classification of 2. From a 4 to a 2 would mean a difference of about $22.5 million per year in reduced insurance premiums. So that's important. We also look at opportunities to improve our fleet by the addition of 5 mechanics, additional resources in public education and fire prevention, and with council support, 25 people were hired in 2014, and a commitment to look forward into future years for another 75. On the operational side, we ended up with a reduction of 4 crews. The reduction meant the closing of Fire Station 424 in Runnymede and a reduction of crews in 3 additional stations, 413, 213, and 215. So again, those choices weren't made without a lot of analysis, without a lot of research. We looked at years of data. We looked at call volumes, response times, and looked at the best option to meet our budget targets with the least impact to service, response times, servicing the public, and safety for our fire staff. Since Toronto became the new city in 1998, there's been a challenge with fire budgets, a challenge to have all the trucks on the road every day due to budget restraints and staff shortages. There's been a process called gapping, where each day, typically trucks are taken out of service to meet our staffing commitment and our financial targets. In 2011, we averaged 5.2 trucks a day. In 2012, we averaged 6 trucks a day. And in 2013, we averaged 4 trucks out of service per day. The impact of going from 128 to 124 is similar to the gapping reduction, but we predetermined which truck. The challenge with the gapping strategy historically is different days, different trucks are taken out of service. It makes it very difficult to measure the impact if each day a different truck moves from a different call. The way we determine data statistically, an impact is a volume of activity. In 2014, with the 4 trucks leaving as of Monday, we've done a comprehensive analysis for the months of January, February, and March of this year. Our goal is to continue analyzing the impact in the station areas and the districts to look at the impact of response times. If, for example, first-in trucks are delayed from previous data, and also what's called the first alarm response, will there be an impact? We'll measure that. If the impact is greater than we presupposed in our calculations, I will bring a report forward to council and acknowledge what that impact is and talk about options and recommendations moving forward. So again, whether it's 424's running area, 413, 213, or 215, we're going to look closely and measure and understand what the impact is moving forward. The month of April is a bit of an anomaly month due to the fact that for 20 days we've had the trucks in service and for 10 days we won't. But once we get to the month of May, we'll have good data for the month to determine if there has been an impact. So again, it's been a challenge. All I can promise is that we will monitor the impact and report out if we find there's any impact to our citizens and to the safety of our firefighters. That's paramount. Now I'm prepared to answer questions. I have a feeling there might be some. When we look at doing risk analysis, fire is based on risk and mitigating risk. Building a fire model is not based solely on call volume. It's really a risk-based model. And so in fire services, whether it's the City of Toronto or other cities in our nation, we do risk analysis, determine the level of risk and what we consider an appropriate response to that risk. We do modeling. Modeling is theoretical. We do assumptions in the modeling, but truly, by measuring the actual calls, the actual impact gives us accurate data, and that's the only manner in which we'll have accurate data. So we can presuppose with trucks or without. When we did our modeling, it showed minor impact. We'll now know with the trucks out through actual data if there's an impact greater. Again, we look at three components when we start to look at response times. The first response time is first truck in. By standard, it's 6 minutes and 20 seconds is our target. The first minute is for dispatch, how long it takes for our people upstairs in this building to evaluate and dispatch the call. The standard is 1 minute. For the months of February and March, for the first time in 15 years, they actually surpassed and we're at 56 seconds. So again, tremendous job, again, working with the staff upstairs and team to improve their dispatching protocol. The second component is turnout time. That's the time it takes firefighters to turn out of the station once they receive the initial call. The standard is 1 minute and 20 seconds. For the months of January, February, and March, we were about 2 minutes and 4 seconds. But there's challenges with that. The first is we have an older station alerting system that doesn't alert all stations and all crews at the same time. There is a built-in delay. This summer, we're installing a modern system, a system that will acknowledge all crews and all stations that require the data on a particular call with less than a 3-second delay. We also will look at technology in the station's equipment. For example, enhancing the mobile data terminals in the trucks, looking at the use of handheld iPads to send firefighters data so they have better information quicker, so they're not waiting for data to leave the station. We'll also look at the actual movement of people in the station. So the goal is to look at improvements in that time to get closer to the standard. The third number is driving. And driving is a 4-minute response for first truck in. In the months of January, February, and March across the city, we were just over 5 minutes and 4 seconds. We need to look at traffic patterns. We need to look at the use of what's called dynamic staging. That means sending the nearest truck. We need to give better technology to the trucks in the field to get and collect information on the call from their field locations. We need to look at the ability through what's called preemptive traffic control to manage traffic signals so there's less delays in moving our apparatus around the city so our firefighters can quicker respond to calls and safer for us as well as our citizens. That's a go-forward position. So that's the first truck in. We are also, for the first time, tracking how long it takes to get what's called the first alarm response. That's all trucks, typically 4 trucks and a district chief to an actual fire. We want to make sure, with the changes we've made, there's no or very limited degradation of that. And if there is an impact to get all trucks in, then we need to manage that and find ways to correct it. So those are some of the things that we'll be doing and needing data on. I guess the answer is, in a perfect world, if I had the budget money to keep everything and add that tomorrow, I would, but it's an evolution. We have a challenge before us today, and we're growing and improving for the future. It's all about timing. So what we're trying to do is provide the best service to the best of our ability within the mandate provided for us. Again, doing our analytics, looking at the data, we felt very strongly that there would be minimal impact. Again, with the trucks out of service, we'll be able to measure that to determine how accurate we were and if we need to look at corrective action. But we wouldn't have made the decision if we thought there would have been a, quote, devastating or dramatical effect. When we look at data, we look at 90% of the time is our standard. For example, now at the 6 minute 20 second standard, our goal is to do it 90% of the time. We're actually about 76%. So we're meeting the standard 76% of the time. So we have to look at how close we are to the 90, and if it's 34, how many calls would be affected? That's a worst case scenario, not average case scenario. So we have to look at what the worst case, what the average case, and what the 90% case is. So what we're trying to do is do a determination, what is the impact based on our standard, what's the average impact, and what's the biggest impact. So we take all those things into account.
So is there accessibility in neighborhoods where you use trucks? There's obvious concern for their own safety. Can you confidently say today that the response times were, in the event of a fire or even medical emergency, that their safety or the efficiency as far as these residents getting service will not be compromised?
If we look at the 4 areas, 3 of the trucks were second trucks in station. So if you speak of a medical cause, for example, as typically a 1-truck response, you'll still have the station open, that first truck responding. So when we did the modeling, there should be less than 1 to 2 second impact getting that first truck on a scene. When we look at Runnymede, with the station closed, that's a bit different. So we have to look at several factors. How long would it take to get the 3 nearest stations to cover that geographic area? We also look at the call volumes. In the month of January, within the 424 actual running area, there was 30 calls, of which 16 were medical. We look at February, there was 31 calls, of which 19 were medical. And in March, there was 39 calls, of which 24 were medical. Now that's in their defined area. They were doing 4 to 5 times that outside of their area. So we start to look at the type of calls, the impact of those calls, and again, with information, what that impact would be. But we will be monitoring going forward. So for all calls in their old 424 area, what is the difference? How much is the difference? How often does that happen? So we'll be analyzing all that information. Thank you all very much for coming today. I appreciate it.